knowledge in a way that's inappropriate with the local system. I know even many years ago I went to Niue, and 43% of the surface of the island had been destroyed by people wanting to farm it the New Zealand way. They had brought in tractors to plow the land, because there, it's a raised, coral platform with a thin layer of volcanic soil on the surface from ash from volcanoes somewhere else that had fallen on the island. And they would find a little pocket of volcanoes and plant a taro in it and so on. But you plow it and you mix the limestone in with the volcanic soil and change its pH and it becomes infertile. And so all these areas were just barren fernlands was all that was left from this attempt to apply the wrong agricultural technique. So we need to also look much more at the local wisdom. What can and cannot be done in an area, and not necessarily assume that we can translate somewhere else, and have the wisdom not to try to do these things without serious consideration of what really is going to work and not work.
Gosh, it's hard to always acquire that balance and the knowledge, isn't it?
Which is why education is so important as well. And an education that includes both the science and the religion, both the spiritual, ethical dimension and the scientific dimension. The science by itself is not enough.
But it's the wisdom to be able to listen to the local people who may well be elderly, and in this day and age, old is sort of, well, we're all almost in the same age group, but old is a bit past it. We like you, person who came back with the modern methods. It's a question of having that consultation and the listening.
Well, I was very struck at the Johannesburg World Conference on Sustainable Development you had 10 years ago. UNESCO organized a whole scientific forum on traditional knowledge. And the presentation that struck me the most was an old Maori healer from New Zealand and a young Maori biochemist together, where the old man was explaining all the different herbs and things from the forest that he used for healing and the wisdom that he had. And the young man said, I am not using my science just to see what can we exploit to make modern drugs out of the traditional knowledge. I'm trying to say, how can I use my science to make him more effective as a traditional healer in his own context? Can I find whether perhaps one of the plants is more potent at one season than another? Could he help to refine the old man's wisdom with his tools of science without undermining the cultural and spiritual framework of that old man's knowledge? And that, for me, was a beautiful example of the kind of spirit that we need to recognize the value in each, the sharing that can take place, the enrichment in each can take place without undermining. On the other hand, you don't necessarily want to say keep all traditional knowledge. I was asked to help with the fisheries management problem in the Solomon Islands, and it was the island of Maneta, where they made the traditional shell money, and in their culture they had these long strings of little discs of shells of white and black and orange that are used to buy pigs and wives and such things. And of course, it's an economic story as well as an ecological story. The same tribal group includes the island of Bougainville in Papua New Guinea, which at the time had the world's largest gold and copper mine on it, Bougainville copper mine. And so the people working in the mine were making good salaries, and therefore there was an inflation in the price of the shell money. And they were having to make more and more shell money to keep up with the demand coming from these wealthy miners. And as a result, they were overfishing the shells. They're running out of shells. So I went out. The government said, "Could we try to find a solution to the problem?" So I went to the district center. When they heard I was from the government, we don't want in from the government here. The government took away one of our motors and so on. So nobody from the government. Oh, he's a Baha'i. Oh, Baha'is are always welcome. So off I go as a Baha'i to this area, and it turns out that the next door village is named Rizwan, and it's an entirely Baha'i village. And so I have immediate contact within the local culture, so to speak, and they say, well, oh, that fishery was managed by the old pagan priests, and there's still a few alive. We could go to the taboo section of the village, and meet with the priests and find out how the system worked. And so I went to meet with one of the priests, and you're sitting in the taboo house, behind this little wall in the village. On the back shelf are all of these baskets full of skulls. Of those skulls, who are those? those are the ancestors of this particular family line. We need to recite their names during the rituals, and they're all there to remind us, who they are. And then he explained that for the fishery, he put taboo on the loon. You cannot collect these shells, in the clear parts of the lagoon. And he'd wait until they gave him enough pigs to sacrifice. When he had enough pigs to perform the rituals, then he would perform the rites, and he would lift the taboo from one section of the lagoon and say, now you can go and collect the shells there. Then he put the taboo back on again, and he would wait to get enough pigs to sacrifice. When he had enough pigs, and then he would lift another section of the lagoon, now you can fish over there, and then put it on again. And he said that traditionally he would keep the taboo on any one part of the lagoon for 4 to 5 years, which was just the time needed for the shells to grow to a good harvestable size. So it was a perfect fisheries management technique.
And for the
And it
pigs
was,
to recover too.
but economically, it maintained the pig standard of the money. In the same way we had a gold standard. Pigs were the most valuable thing in their culture. And so to link the traditional money to the pig standard ensured a certain value for the money as well. So it made perfect economic sense. Then he said, but since everybody in the village had become Christian or Baha'i, they weren't given enough pigs to sacrifice, he kept the taboo on for 30 years. So the system is just breaking down. The system just breaking down. So I met with the fishermen and I said, this was the wisdom behind your old ways. It was not all wrong. Why don't you form a group of the wise old fishermen you respect the most and ask them to put on and take off the taboo in the same way in the lagoon to maintain the fisheries management, to maintain the sustainability of the resource, the reason behind it. To show that science could link with religion in that sense, and they could extend this. On the other hand, when the old pagan priest said, well, when I said there were big holes in the thatch and the roof, it was pretty rotten. Why don't you rebuild the taboo? I said, it's hard to do, because to rebuild the taboo house, you dig a hole in the ground. You put a man in the hole, and you put the center post in on top of the man. Now we can't find men to put in the hole. So he's like, don't keep everything in traditional culture. Pick and choose. Some things you may want to retain, other things you may decide are less appropriate for the world. So science and religion come together in many different ways.
It's a good story to end on, I think.